Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is John Hill, CEO for TechSage Solutions. We are a managed IT services provider with a big focus on helping a lot of DoD clients with compliance work and kind of delving into some of the other stuff, such as the insurance that we're going to talk about today. But appreciate everyone being on. We had a little technical issue that we lost all internet in our building just right before this, and had to switch over to my laptop and my hotspot on my phone, and it appears to be working. So we'll just press on with that. But I'm here today with my friend Rusty Goodwin. He is with Midstate Group. He's an insurance broker licensed in health, life, annuities, property casualty insurance. And he also specializes in corporate compliance. And that's how I got to know him, is through a group that we participate in with that. But he's got certifications in DISC profile, predictive index, talent optimization. And he actually helps companies like ours across the country work with our clients to achieve a best possible risk exposure problem by helping to develop strategies and security and compliance. So we decided that really everybody's probably tired of PowerPoints at this point. And so we would just kind of flow this a little bit, right? And so I'll be asking Rusty some questions. And Rusty, you want to make any comments before we get started?
Just that I'm thrilled that you didn't want to use a PowerPoint, because I hate them. Usually I find the only people that like them are the ones that created them. So I'd much rather just have a chat and see what questions you guys have, and push us near the end of the week with a good conversation. So
good deal. Well, I've got some soup starter questions now. That those of you on the call, if you do have any questions, if you'd like to throw them in you should be able to access the Q&A and do that. At least I didn't turn that off, so hopefully it's still on. Warren was able to do it a moment ago. So if any questions come up that you'd specifically like to ask Rusty to comment on or make answers on, then please go ahead and do that, and then we will bring those in as they come in while we're working on these others. So Rusty, why don't we get started with one that's it's pretty common, I think, and that's, what are some of the common misconceptions or mistakes that people have or make when it comes to liability insurance as a whole?
Oh my goodness. Well, we could take the whole hour on that. I won't, but we could take the whole hour on that. I think a big one is that people assume that once they pay for an insurance policy, that they don't have any risk anymore, which is not true at all. I mean, an insurance policy is just one of the tools that we use to manage risk. But we as business owners, John, you and your MSP folks on the call here, me, at the end of the day, we still all own our risk. We just use different tools in our quiver of arrows to manage that risk. So the insurance policy that we have simply transfers some of that risk to the insurance carrier. And kind of along with that thought, I think people think once they have an insurance policy, nothing bad's going to happen. Well, that's being as silly as thinking once you have car insurance, you'll never have an accident. No, you have car insurance so that when you have an accident, you can be made whole. And but sometimes in the cyber world, it's easy to displace that angst and say, "Oh, I'm paying for an insurance policy, so I don't have to worry about it anymore." And I think if I was going to round up my top three, the other one would be that no claims are ever paid. I don't know why I would spend the money, because claims don't get paid. Well, some don't, and there's good reasons why, but most do. It's just that there are no news stations or news websites that think that someone getting a claim paid is newsworthy of printing. They only want to print about it when a claim is denied. So I could go on and on, but I won't. But if you'd like more examples, just ask. But I think those are some of the top three.
Well, that kind of reminds me of a story I read a few months ago, that in the early days of especially the cyber insurance, that a lot of companies said, well, I'm going to buy cyber insurance and I'm not going to put any protections in place or do anything to help limit the risk, because the insurance company's taking all of it. And of course they did for a while and decided they didn't really like losing billions of dollars. So they put a lot more controls that we can talk about in place to help prevent that, to help prevent some of those problems from happening, so that they didn't have to cover them, and
Yeah.
they exempted a lot of that now.
Yeah, and it's really it's kind of turned upside down in the last few years. Back 10 years ago, like you're talking about, if an insurance company wrote a cyber liability policy, they could anticipate maybe spending 30 cents of every premium dollar they brought in, and keeping 70 cents for administration and profit for the dividends for the shareholders, or if it's a mutual company, dividends back to the policyholders. As early as 3 years ago, they were spending 75 cents of every dollar. And in 2020, they spent 95.5 cents of every dollar. So if I came to all of you guys and said, hey, I've got a great business opportunity for you, but you can only keep 4.5 pennies on every dollar, you probably wouldn't want to do that business with me. And so that has been a big catalyst for what you guys are seeing in the insurance business on the whole, but especially with cyber liability and some of these other executive risks, like some of you might have errors and omissions, or some of you may call that professional liability, directors and officers, that executive suite of policies. But premiums have gone up. They're getting harder to get those policies. John, I'm sure that on behalf of your clients, you have found this pain. The applications for that insurance have become almost as long as War and Peace, right? Okay. I mean, it's just crazy amount of questions. But there's a reason why, because that attitude of, hey, I've got insurance, I don't have to worry about it. All that really did was motivate the bad actors to say, hey, no one cares about the security and compliance. Insurance companies are an easy mark. Let's just hack these guys and let the insurance companies pay for it. And so we've had to react in our industry. We've kind of had to react, because what we really want is for our customers to stay healthy and whole, and to not have to file claims, because even the companies that get a hack and have insurance and file a claim, I don't know if you've seen this anywhere, but on the small to medium-sized businesses, 60% of the companies that get a breach go out of business within 6 months. And so none of us, John as your MSP, or the insurance carrier as the person who underwrites your insurance, they don't want you to get a claim in the first place, because they don't want you to go out of business. Because whatever money they're making from you now, they'd like to keep doing that for a long time. Even if they can't make more, they don't want you to go out of business. And so that attitude has really been a catalyst for the bad actors to step it up and get into your digital business, because they knew that insurance was an easy mark. And so that's part of the explanation behind some of the increased premiums. And John, I do at some point at your direction want to talk about some of the change in behaviors that they're demanding in the insurance applications. I think it's important that we spend some time talking about that today. But they're trying to mitigate these losses by making insurance harder to get, not to torment you, but to, and I know it feels like it, but to protect you and to protect them. I know why John has an insurance guy, because he's guaranteed to not be the most hated guy on the Zoom. Just bring the insurance guy up so everybody
That's
can
good. Come on. Well, hey, you brought up a good point on the 60% of businesses that do have a major breach go out of business. And, yes, which leaves us 40% there. So think of it in a more positive aspect there, at least 40% survive. But then there's another scary statistic that goes with that I read in a report that shows that 26% of those businesses that 40% that do survive, 26% of those businesses don't do anything at all to help protect having another breach. So they don't take any of the preventive measures that the insurance companies are now requiring.
Yep. In fact, the FBI, I just sat in on a panel. I wasn't a speaker. I was just enjoying learning for a change. You're 10 times more likely, if you've been breached one time, to get breached again than someone who's never been breached. And theoretically, guys and gals, there's no such thing as a company that hasn't been breached. You just don't know about it yet. Right? IBM tells you. I mean, one of you all systems, and if you're with John, your security stack is probably pretty stringent. But even if you do get breached right now, it might be as much as 196 days before you know about it. And so it really pays to be vigilant, and it really pays to be compliant. And I hate that word. John, can we kind of change that terminology for this call and maybe say, hey, let's govern ourselves better so that
Like that.
governance is anything we decide on our own to do, what we make ourselves do, right? Compliance is what other people make us do. And with the job that people like John and I have is to help you guys take a look at this risk. You've heard of that term, governance, risk, and compliance. So if we can take a proper view of that risk that's in the middle of those two words, once we have a proper view of that, almost always we choose to govern ourselves more conservatively, even than what compliance will require. And so that's what I think, like calls like we're on today, is important to really take a look at what those underlying risks are. Partly because they're changing so fast, it's hard to keep up with them.
Well, yeah.
And partly because we have a lot of businesses that don't take them seriously to begin with. So we kind of got two things fighting against us there.
Well, and kind of as a furtherance of that, there's another question that I got that says, why have premiums increased so drastically for cyber liability insurance? And you've talked about, with some of the things you've already discussed, some of those reasons, but could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. I mean, a big catalyst for that was just how much money they're spending. I mean, right now, in fact, John, I meant to email you last night because I got off the phone last night with a huge underwriter. You've heard of Beasley, right? Have you heard of Beasley?
Yep.
They do cyber liability. In 12 months, they will be out of the market for many, many industries related to cyber liability because they know writing a cyber liability policy is a guaranteed loss. And the players that are going to still be in the market are going to raise those premiums because they, just like you, if they're spending more than they're taking in, they can't stay in business very long. I mean, that's the simple math of it, right? But then the couple other factors at play is they're insuring people who are just refusing to participate in the overall health of their organizations. And it's always surprising to me why it seems so hard to convince people to have good cyber hygiene, right? They want to make sure their health plans are solid and sustainable. They want to make sure their cash flow is sustainable. They have no problem meeting OSHA regulations or HR compliance. But it's like anything that becomes in with the nerds, no offense, John, they don't want to deal with anything the nerds have to deal with, but it's just as important. And the IT department, the cyber department of your companies, whether you're big or small, unlike all the other departments, literally touch every other department in our organizations. Emails, data storage, communicating with patients, billing and statement and invoicing, everything runs through that IT. And so part of this reason the premiums have gone up is because the insurance companies are like, we're going to make you care about this because, John, to your point, 10 years ago, they just said, oh, I have cyber insurance, but I don't have to worry about it. Well, they're just making you worry about it now, right? And the third component of this is how aggressive the bad actors are getting. John, I think I've shared this with you, so I'm sorry you have to hear this again, but every day, 230,000 new types of malware are created. Every day. You know how hard it is to fight against that? Because they have 230,000 chances. 1 out of 230,000, they win. We have to be protecting against all that 230,000 at once, and we can't even make one mistake. So the insurance companies, better than the government, better than even big tech, they're actuaries. If you want to know who the real nerds are the actuaries at the insurance companies, because they can tell you to the penny what a client's going to cost them. And so that's generated, the increase in premiums and the added difficulty to get these policies. But the good news is there really are ways to mitigate that. And that's where I like partnering with people like John, because for the customers that get it, for the customers that say, I want to have as healthy of an organization in my network and IT division as I do anywhere else, there really are things that we can do to develop a more mature risk posture. And what's so great is when your digital world is secure, it's amazing how much more safe the rest of your company can become. And so that's what's been the impetus or the catalyst for insurance companies, and listen, I'm on the insurance company side of the table, and I think it's crazy how, I can't imagine how you guys feel because I'm not on your side of the table, but it's driving me nuts and I'm on their side. Like, oh my God, how expensive is this going to get? So as we look at these risks, as we look at the prices going up and all the negative things we have to say, there are some human behaviors that we can change. And John, are you okay if we dive into this now? I want to make sure I'm
Sure.
tracking with where you want to go.
I mean, that's because that's the important thing is, everyone that's attending, they need to learn from this and get some information they didn't have.
Yeah,
So,
because
so sure.
insurance can get so boring sometimes, and I don't, and I'm very good at, sometimes hearing me speak is like drinking from a fire hydrant. So I'm trying to be sensitive.
Sure.
But John, and I know you and I have talked about this, but if you all look at the things that have changed on your insurance applications, and by the way, those insurance applications that you're filling out actually become part of your insurance policy. An insurance policy is nothing but a contract. And those applications that you filled out now become promises you've made to the insurance company. Let's not talk about cyber for a minute. Let's talk about homeowners insurance, right? If I say to Erie, or you might have State Farm or whoever for your homeowners insurance, hey, if I put a smoke alarm and a burglar detection system in my house, can I get cheaper premiums? And they will say, yes, you can. So on the application, you say, I have a burglar alarm. Well, if you say that on the application, you've just promised State Farm or Erie that you're going to put one in. If you never put one in and you try to file a claim, they're going to say, well, let me see that burglar alarm system you promised to put in. And if you can't show them you have it, they're going to deny your claim, right? So all these questions that guys like John are helping you walk through. Hey, does your company have, what's some of the things we talked about, John? Multi-factor authentication, right? That's an important one. Hey, do you guys do phishing simulation training? Do you do cybersecurity awareness training? Is your MSP or your internal IT, are you backing up your data regularly? Are you securing your endpoints? All these things that used to be niceties 10 years ago are now necessities because they're becoming part of the promises we make to the insurance companies. And what I want you to notice, if you haven't already, is almost every one of these requirements revolve around human behaviors. See, John can go in and let's pretend we have a bank and we hire somebody to build a very sophisticated combination lock on our bank vault door that no one could crack no matter what. Well, that bank vault lock doesn't do any good if I leave the bank and forget to shut the bank vault, shut the door. So security is building the combination lock. Compliance, or the human behaviors, is remembering to shut that door. And all these tools that we're mentioning are things that help our human capital John put in place at your facilities. And we spend, I read a report a couple months ago, in 2021, we spent 262 billion. So that's almost $250 billion on hardware and software security. But yet 95% of all the breaches come from human error. So we're putting all these tools in place, and it's still the crash test dummies like me messing things up. So if you'll notice all these behaviors now that become part of this contract, it's the insurance company saying, hey, do yourselves and us a favor and make sure you're taking full advantage of these security stacks that your internal IT or MSPs are putting in place. And if we can kind of overcome the fact that these might seem too disruptive. I mean, honestly, is clicking one more link on an MFA really that disruptive to your day? Is changing your password in a password vault a couple times a year, is that really too disruptive compared to maybe being out of business for 9 months because you got hacked? Or I don't know what fields you guys are in, but if you're Department of Defense losing a contract because you're not compliant, or if you're in HIPAA getting a fine because you let medical data, how disruptive is it really? I mean, the average cost of notification, let's just say you get a breach, and one of the things that they require you to do is notify everybody in your database who was affected. Well, that costs an average of $150 per name. So I just dealt with a medical firm that has 250,000 names in their database. That would be $37 million for them just to notify. And I asked her, is that a bankrupting event for you? She said, yes, it would be. I'm like, so you think you might be willing to click one more button now to save losing 37 million? So what if putting that risk into perspective, and if I feel like I'm fear mongering, I apologize. That's not ever the tactic that I take. It's just taking a real look at the risk. And so, John, as you and I had conversations, I'll be, these guys aren't my customers, so I can be a little bit more direct, right? There's real frustration there when on the MS side of the MSPs, when I see them giving good advice to their customers and the customers just blow it off. And it's not because John's not honest or they don't have a good relationship. And it's not even because they don't believe them. It's maybe they just don't understand what the real liability is there. And now, and I'm going to take a break here for another question, but I want to get this one thing is, in recent years, relative to security breaches and privacy breaches, in civil litigation and punitive damages, they have pierced that corporate veil, and now they are starting to hold C-suite members and board members personally liable for breaches and privacy breaches under the duty of care clauses and fiduciary care. So now we're tapping into your D&O and your errors and omissions insurance for a breach as well. And so we really got to start taking a proper look at this. Long answer to why premiums are going up, but it's all true, and it's all you all needed to hear it.
Well, and that's the key thing. It's that really, covering some of the basic cyber hygiene things goes a long way towards your insurance, and and makes the carriers a lot happier and ready to deal with you. We got a couple of questions here from
I just saw that. Which one do you want me to tackle, John? You tell me.
Why don't you go ahead and start with that first one about if a client has cyber policy and gets breached due to a business email compromise.
So on the first one about the MFA, that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so this actually just happened to a medical firm here in Virginia. They had a very good MSP like John is. The MSP said you need to put MFA in place, and they did. They paid for it. They installed it, but they didn't enforce it. And one of the doctors, in his refusal to use MFA, caused a breach. So even though they enrolled in it, paid, subscribed to it, had it in their security stack, because they could not document that they enforced it. And in fact, the documentation forensically showed otherwise, that claim did not get paid out, because when they said on the application, we have MFA and enforced it, they made a promise that they did not keep. So that claim didn't get paid. So it is, they could attempt to get funds back from you guys as an MSP, but that's where I would encourage a guy like John, document everything. And even in the insurance world, when I tell clients, hey, I think you need to do this, 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 and this, if they won't do it, I make them sign a letter of declination saying, Rusty, you told me to do this, and of my free will, I decided to not take your advice. And I keep that on, documentation is everything when it comes to audits and fines and regulations. That proof of life, and that proof of improvement, and that proof of training, and that proof of enforcement is vital. So I hope that answered your question. And I will say, related to that too, I don't have stats for recent years, but I do for 2020. In 2020, 49% of cyber liability claims that were filed were either underpaid or not paid. Most of those were underpaid. There were very few that didn't get paid at all, but because of problems just like this. So whether they'll pay it all or just a portion, that depends on the carrier and what's in the contract. Again, that insurance policy is just a contract. And so you'll have to look at the insuring agreements and the conditions to find out who's promising what to who. And that second one there, John, any comments about that, John?
Let's make sure too that with MFA, if any of you are not familiar with that term, it's multi-factor authentication.
Yes.
It's what pretty much all the banks are requiring these days. And now, of course, if you have cyber insurance, it is one of the basic requirements that get implemented across the board on everything that it can be implemented on. And those the newer questionnaires specify that. It used to just be, hey, do you have MFA? Great, boom, you're done. But now it's, do you have it? Where are you using it? Is everyone using it? It's a whole series of questions that come out of that one that we used to have several years ago. So,
and what's crazy, John, is now when you answer no to that, it used to be when you answered no to that, they just made you pay a higher premium, right? Now, if you answer no to that, they're like, we won't even write you. No matter how big of a check you want to write, we won't give you a policy. That second question there, at what point do you call your insurance agent? I will tell you, the very first thing you do if you get a cyber is call your lawyer. Call your lawyer first. And then have your lawyer tell you, if it's a multi-state thing, he'll tell you to call the FBI, call your insurance agent. But again, read that contract, and in the conditions part of your insurance policy, it will tell you what's expected of you in an event, how much time you have to contact the insurance company. But as much as I'd love to have you tell me first, tell your lawyer first, because then the lawyer can do the communication for you, and all that information is protected, confidential between lawyer and client. You don't want to start calling the insurance company and saying you made a mistake when maybe it wasn't your mistake at all. So you need to call your lawyer first.
And the key part about that, Rusty, is that in advance of when something happens, you should have a lawyer that you've talked to that says, yes, you can call me. I understand what to do on this type of stuff, because all lawyers don't necessarily know how to handle this. So
right.
It's important to develop.
And honestly, your broker can help you. If you have a good broker, they're going to agree with this strategy and probably be able to help you find a lawyer that can help you speak to that. Because like us, all my customers, I don't want them to go out of business. Then I have to go find new customers. I know that sounds selfish, but isn't that true for all of us? We want all of our customers to keep paying us. So, I'm going to do what I can to keep you in business. Is it possible to get a good cyber policy but keep costs lower by not getting coverage to pay the ransom? What you're going to see is some of those things are automatically happening. So they'll say you have ransomware coverage, but a lot of times it's not for the full amount of your total liability coverage. Let's say you have 2 million in coverage. They might say, we're only going to pay 100,000 towards ransomware. So that you're already seeing some adjustments like that. You got to read the MICE type or have a broker that can help you, explain it to you, what's in that contract. And there are also some service warranties out there in the cyber world that you can get, kind of like, it's not insurance, but it's kind of like an AFLAC for cyber, right? They'll pay in the event of something happens. Think about, you buy your home warranties or your car warranties that will pay for certain things if they break down. Well, there are companies out there now that I deal with that can offer you things like that. They can step in and give you some cash payout. But again, they're going to make you follow certain behaviors as well, just like the insurance companies will. So really the best thing you can do is have good cyber hygiene. But so to that question, I'm going to give you a sort of a yes, because some of it is automatically in there already, whether you want it to be or not. And some of it is negotiable with your carrier.
And I'll make a comment on that too, is in that, from my perspective as a provider for this, the biggest vector, the biggest threat out there, and it's been increasing dramatically over the last 2 to 3 years, is ransomware. It's so prevalent, and almost every day you can look and see a business. Usually they only report the big businesses because that's news. Smaller businesses, that's not news, and nobody cares. But that's the biggest threat out there right now. And in just my opinion, it should be part of any cyber policy, because of that. It's highly unlikely that you're going to get a lot of the other stuff, but ransomware, yeah, it's a biggie.
Yep. And then I love this question. Some applications are now asking for a Microsoft security score, or if you're doing penetration testing. The pen test is something that your MSP can arrange for you. I recommend them at least annually. There are other methods that John, I'm sure at your all's convenience there are ways to do that where it doesn't have to break the bank. There are other ways to do that. Other platforms that I know John has. I mean, I'm assuming you do, John, because most MSPs do. That can give you a real thorough pen test without you having to mortgage your whole company to get it done.
Well, and that's only a recent thing. In the past, pen testing has been incredibly expensive, and now they have come out with some platforms that are a lot more affordable.
Yep. And how often you do or don't do a pen test really, if it affects the price or your ability to get it, is sort of going to depend on the industry that you're in. And you got to read the application and read the specific contracts from carriers. But I will tell you right now, John, I know this sucks for you, but everybody on this call is going to have a much easier time getting cyber liability insurance than you ever will. Because the MSPs, they're like, we don't even want to touch you guys, and it's getting harder and harder and harder. So it might be harder for John to get, that might have more of an impact on a guy like John if he doesn't do pen testing than if you have a Dollar General store, right? And you're just taking credit cards. So again, the answer to that depends, but it all can affect the premium. But what stinks about that, at some level, it's not even going to be about the premium. It's going to be about whether or not they'll even take you if you're not practicing all these things. Some of the anonymous questions are from me too. You're both doing a great job. It's not a question, but thanks. Will you name some of these co-insurer from? Can David? Can you clarify on that? So I want to make sure that I understand the question. You talking about that service warranty thing that I was talking about? Like, yeah. So it's not really an Aflac. They're just like them. Yeah. So, yeah, there are several companies out there, and actually John has access to them all. They only deal with MSPs. So, there are several companies out there that will sell you that service warranty, and they're actually relatively inexpensive. I mean, you can get $1 million worth of payout, like, to use the Aflac example again, if you break your leg, they'll give you so much money, or if you're in the hospital, they'll give you so much money. Well, on a ransomware, they'll write you a check for so much, or if you get a data breach, they'll give you so much, and they can be as cheap as $100 a month to have that. And that's where you can kind of step in and say, now I have this added cash reserve over here, this cash I can access if something happens. But again, you're going to have all the same stringent requirements to get that service warranty as you are. This doesn't give you a pass from having good cyber hygiene. So you still got to brush your teeth, still got to use deodorant, still got to brush your hair, or you're not going to get that money either, right? We've got to practice. But Cysurance is one, and I think Chubb is getting ready to come out with a side product like that. But again, just reach out to John, and those guys deal directly with the MSPs, because it's going to be the MSPs that prove to them that you're behaving either poorly or well. So you're going to need John's help to document that you're doing all those. Yes, some cash back to reduce risk. Yep, absolutely. I'll take 3. Dude, I want to meet you. You're funny. Let's see. This year, our cyber quote includes a risk assessment from Coalition. Yeah, Coalition. Now, if you're an MSP, you don't like Coalition because they won't write MSPs. But Coalition is a great carrier. If you can get them to write you, from my side of the table, they're great. They're stringent, but for good cause. If John is your MSP, he can help you fill those out to make sure you answer them correctly. He can help you fill in those missing gaps. I mean, the application can be a great discussion point for you guys and your MSPs to look at what you might be missing, right? And there could be some things that your MSP has been asking you to buy for years that you just didn't want to spend the money on, that you might have to say, well, we got to do it now. There could be security options out there that 3 and 4 years ago, when you guys decided on your security stack, those products didn't even exist, or those risks didn't even exist. So it's not like you guys made bad decisions or missed something. It's just that the biggest truth we all need to remember here is that all risk changes over time. And so there could be things we need to put in place now that we wouldn't have even dreamed about 3 and 4 years ago. So the external and scans, there are ways to do that now that, unlike 4 and 5 years ago, don't have to drain your bank account. And John can do the work, and he can still make his money, and you don't have to spend a fortune. There's plenty of room there to everybody to survive the game and not have to go broke, right? And when you say we found a surprise that wasn't caught during our external vulnerability scans, you don't have to be afraid of that. The carriers want you to catch things that you didn't know about. That's the whole point of them asking you to do the scans. What they don't want is that camper sit in your email for 196 days and you don't know he's there. So the more often you can do, I recommend some sort of scan. Don't panic, because I'm not talking about the $30,000 pen test. Look at me. I'm not talking about those. There are very inexpensive scans you can do on a monthly basis that will help you keep tabs of the bad guys that don't have to break your bank. And so don't be afraid. John, I want to encourage you with this as the MSP. Don't be afraid of what you might be missing, because every day there's something new guys like you and me have to pay attention to. And don't be tempted to be afraid of bringing this up to your clients that they might think you're doing a bad job, because you're not. There's just a lot of bad guys out there doing a very good job that we have to keep up with every day. And if you're attending this session, don't be afraid of taking an assessment, even if it's going to show that you're terrible, because we need to have a snapshot of a moment in time that shows a true risk analysis of what we look like when we started this compliance journey, right? Because the government wants to know that you've done a risk analysis, and so does your insurance carrier. The second thing they want to know is that you are improving on that state, that you are training and practicing and putting policies and procedures in place that improve on your compliance state of being. And the third thing they want to see is that you can document all that and prove that it happened. So when I see this question, I see a little bit of fear in there. Let me take 10,000 pounds off your shoulders. You don't have to be afraid of looking bad. The insurance companies and the government, they want you to sniff out the areas where you might look bad, because you can improve on what you won't inspect. And so it's very important to, on a regular basis, dig in and kind of say, okay, guys, where are we doing good? Where do we kind of suck? Where do we got to do better? It's an ever-changing game. So I hope I answered that question there.
Yeah, let's see something that, and that's one reason we continually review our cybersecurity stack. And we rarely name what the products are, because they might change during the year. If we find something that's better, something that's kind of gone out of favor, we're going to change it. And that's because in the case of the risk assessments, those are a point in time.
Right.
Today at 3:00, when we completed the risk assessment, that's how it was, but it could change by 3:05. And so that's what you have to do. And that's why having regular types of assessments of certain things, and we're trying to kick into more of that, with our clients, are doing more periodic assessments, maybe not to that full blown, risk assessment type thing, but some more basic stuff, because it can find those new threats that, may have not been available to find, since the bad guys are always coming out with new stuff faster than the good guys can come out with. So, just keep that in mind with the risk assessment. It is a point in time. It's hopefully valid for a period of time, but that's why we have to always be reviewing that and looking at that and finding out, okay, what can we do better? What product has come out that's going to protect from these new threats that have come out. And so we do that all the time.
And what's so great, John, what makes me happy for people in your industry is how much of this stuff now is able to become more automated, and thus making it cheaper to do. So what makes me happy for you and other MSPs is, over time, you've been able to start doing a better job. I mean, can you imagine if you still had to charge, if you still had to do all this manually with all the stuff that you have to do, there'd not be a client on the earth who could afford you.
No, there couldn't.
And so as we look at risk, there are 4 ways to handle it, right? You accept it. There might be some risks that you decide, I'm just going to take my chances. So You might say, well, I'm going to change my password once a year instead of every 2 years. Okay, I'm going to accept that risk. You can reduce the risk by doing what John tells you, or doing what guys like I tell you, changing your human behaviors, increasing your security stack, making yourself more robust. You can transfer risk by way of an insurance policy, or you can avoid it just by going out of business. Then you have no risk, right? You can just say, I'm not going to have any risk and make any money.
And that's the reason that we really focus a lot on education. We've got weekly cybersecurity tips. I do some videos each week that talk about a cybersecurity tip of some kind, give some examples, and just in general, sending out some phishing emails here and there, and to see who clicks on something that may need some training. So that's a critical component of all this. And most of the insurance companies are also saying, what are you doing for cybersecurity education? And
it's super important, because let's talk about phishing training. That's a great thing to bring up, John. So that's something everybody should be doing. It is not expensive to do, and it's not very disruptive. And there are so many slick ways to do it now. Your employees can't even give each other a heads up, because everyone gets a different email. So it's not like, hey, watch out from the phony email from UPS, but we need to think beyond just the phishing training to maybe the C-suite level, the HR level. Let's say that John works for me and he fails 20 phishing simulation emails in a row. Well, what do I do with John? That's not an IT issue anymore. That's an HR issue, right? If we gave you harassment training 10 times in a row and you failed that, we'd fire you, right? But sometimes when people fail the cyber compliance stuff, we don't know what to do with it, or we pawn it off on the nerds down in the nerdery. They have to deal with it, but it's a people issue, and most of our problems in compliance are people problems. And so that's where I come along with guys like John, and we say, all right, what's your policy around this? How do you train your human capital about this? What is it that you're going to do when people won't comply? And the bad news is, and actually, I'm probably talking about most of you on the call, if you're the decision makers. So sorry. The higher you go up in an organization, the less compliant they want to be. They're the ones who think they're too busy to hit the extra button or use a VPN or virtual private network or take the extra steps. And but they're the ones really who need to model that behavior the most, because the rest of the organization is going to follow you in how you set your compliance culture. So it really is important to take a better look at that risk. And again, it's if the speed limit is 70 and I'm driving at night and it's foggy and rainy and I drive 60, I've just exercised governance based on the risk that I see. If I drive 120, a state trooper is going to force me into compliance. Right? So we got to take a good look at that risk and decide how we're going to behave. And the good news for John, as you run your organization, and you guys, as you run your organizations, when we exercise governance, we really are taking control back from the government, or back from the insurance companies, or back from whoever's making us do all these horrible things. And we are taking control. You wouldn't turn over your accounting department to somebody else. You wouldn't turn over your HR department to somebody else. But so often we just let the government or insurance company set the parameters for our cyber health. And I don't know why we do it. We've got to take control of it, and we need to become the masters of our.
Rusty, if you can hear me, you have frozen.
But still get us there from a compliance perspective. And the good news is, when we do that right, insurance becomes an easier proposition. Adhering to government guidelines becomes an easier proposition. We greatly reduce the risk of fines and penalties, or civil litigation, civil punitive damages. And John, I think I've shared this with you before. In 2020, and a lot of states have codified this now. In fact, I don't have the most current list, but I know Ohio was the first, and there's been a string of them afterwards. But one of the last laws that Donald Trump signed before he left office, I think it was like literally days, like January 5th of 2020, is called a safe harbor. And if you, as an organization, at the very minimum, and you're not going to know what all these acronyms are, but it's okay. there's a framework of best practices called NIST. And it's just a suggestion of how we ought to behave as companies to protect our data. And Donald Trump signed into law that if you'll, at the minimum, follow those best practices and can prove that you have for at least 12 months, if you get a breach, you're going to get a pass on punitive and civil damages because you're able to show, hey, I've been doing the best I can. I've been following the very requirements that you guys recommend. Some people call it a plausible defense. Some people call it safe harbor. But if we can get that clock ticking and show that we're practicing that framework, now we're also protected from civil litigation. And guess who likes the fact that they won't have to pay money to defend you? Your insurance companies, right? So it's kind of a win all the way around, talking about making ourselves more robust. So I hope that makes sense there too.
And Rusty, something that we did, gosh, years ago, there's an organization called CompTIA for the IT industry. And CompTIA has a security plus trust mark certification that's based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. And we got that certification a long time ago. And that's really what we've kind of based a lot of our stuff on over the years. And what we recommend to our clients is within that framework, because it's kind of there's lots of compliance frameworks out there. And this one is kind of, I think, of the Swiss Army knife of compliance frameworks, because so many of the others have built what they're requesting around it. So that was a great piece of information there, because that is a very important framework, and one that if you even loosely comply with it, you've got fairly good cyber hygiene, and the insurance companies like that.
Well, and see what I hear when you say that, John, what makes me like that so much is you're kind of practicing what you preach, right? You're holding yourself to the same standards that you're asking your clients to go. And that's what, I can't tell you how many MSPs around the country just want to be the guy to fix your printer or sell you a new piece of hardware, but they don't really care much about making you secure, because that means they'd have to do the same thing, and they don't want to spend the time and the money. And so that's why I like working with guys like you, John, because you are walking the talk. So it's not unreasonable now when you come to a client and say, hey, this is really what I think you ought to do. And the reason why you know that is because it's exactly what you do. And that's the kind of folks that I like dealing with. And as I refer in my insurance clients to MSPs around the country, I'm always looking for organizations like yours, because it's incumbent on me to watch out and put my clients in the best hands possible. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I'm a broker, not an agent. And so an agent, under his contract, an agent's first obligation is really to the insurance company. So if you've got a Farmers or a State Farm and a Liberty, all these captive agents, and they're not doing anything wrong. They're doing exactly what the law and their contract states. So they're not bad. I'm not saying anybody's a bad guy. I'm not ascribing malice. Please don't mishear me. But their first responsibility is to their insurance company, because we represent tons of carriers. And that's what you really ought to find in your area, is a broker you can deal with that represents a lot of carriers. Their first obligation has to be to the client. And so when I'm looking where what hands I want to put my client in, I can really look out for what's best for them, not for the insurance company that happens to have their policy. But what's so great about it is if I make sure my clients are in good hands, then the carrier is taken care of as well, because we're all working together. And it really is, John. I think I stole this from you. I stole it from one MSP. So if it's from you, I'm still not going to give you credit. I'm just going to say it. It takes security, compliance, and insurance. It's a three-legged stool, and you can't have any two without the one or any one without the two. You got to have all three in this day and age to have a very, very mature risk posture when it relates to your cyber. Security, compliance, and insurance. They all three kind of back each other up. And without any one of them, you'll just tip over and fall flat on your face.
Yeah, I think I actually used that at a presentation I did about a month ago down in Orlando as part of my presentation of that three-legged.
Okay.
So
I did steal it from you then. Okay. It's good though. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So,
but I see that David also commented that his firm also has that that security trust mark. So
Wow.
that's good. That's excellent.
Yeah, that's sweet. And it really does. And I want to just speak of compliance on the whole now, not just cyber compliance, right? But I deal with my clients with their OSHA compliance, with HR compliance. A lot of my financial companies, they have FINRA to deal with. And it's amazing too, once you can get any kind of compliance, not just cyber, just a few core habits built into your culture at your organizations, it's amazing how much easier it now becomes to have you compliant in every way. So you don't have to change the whole world. You don't have to go to bed tonight with 99 compliance problems and wake up tomorrow with them all perfect. Pick a few that you know you can work on. Pick a few that you know you can afford, that you can instill change in your human capital, in your employees, and a few small wins, right? Success breeds more success. A few small wins make you more wins. And all of a sudden now, guys like John and I aren't selling compliance as a service. We're selling compliance as a culture. We're going to really help you change your organizations to be very, very robust and very, very hygienic when it comes to all things compliance. So it is doable, but it has to be intentional, and it has to start from the top and work its way down.
No, and that's a really good point, Rusty, because that's one thing that we really focus on is trying to make that cultural change, and just gradually, slowly, by implementing things and just leading things along, because you're right, it's got to be cultural to really, really stick, and to where you're not just doing it for a few days and then it's gone. So that's,
Well, think about it. Like when I was a kid, I'm showing my age here now. When I was a kid in the 60s, my dad had the estate wagon. Remember those, like from Family Vacation, right? And I would stand on the front seat in the middle of the front seat with my hand on my dad's shoulder and ride with him everywhere. No seatbelt, no car seat, no nothing. Right. So then the 70s come along and they start introducing seatbelts. So still nobody wore them. And then they started passing laws where they were trying to make you wear them. And people like, you can't tell me what to do. I have my freedoms, right? That didn't work either. But then they started putting out data that showed how many lives were saved. They put out marketing campaigns that weren't about, you have to do this, but hey, look at the risk if you don't. Ta-da! Right. All of a sudden, people started governing themselves, and it changed the culture. Now it's very rare. And when I put my seatbelt on, I never once go, well, I better do this or I'm going to get a ticket. I'm like, it's just my human nature now to put it on. It's part of our culture. And that's the same kind of a mind shift we need to make in our organizations. Like, I know you think it's because you're being forced to, but here's the context about why it's important. And you can have experts, to John's point, have John's folks come in and help educate your people. Yeah. Once they know the why behind it, it becomes much easier to accomplish the what that you're trying to accomplish.
No, that's the key is making it a habit. And once you can do it enough times, and I forget what research says that a certain amount of times is you have to do it, but once it becomes a habit, then you don't worry about it anymore. You just automatically do it. And that's kind of with the seatbelt analogy, just automatically these days, you just kind of grab it and, buckle up and go.
Do you remember when they tried to make cars that forced you to put the seatbelt on, and those cars wouldn't sell because people were like, screw you, you can't make me, those models went away really quickly. They had to change the culture. They couldn't force it down people's throats. And that was the real win there.
Yeah. So sure. So, well, I wonder, do we have any more questions? I think we've got to the last one. If
I need to meet this David guy. He's funny. Click it or ticket, Cybertrain or feel the pain.
I like it.
Yes, my man. I'm going to steal that one too, buddy. That's awesome. Cybertrain or feel the pain. That's good.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, well, if we don't have any more questions, Rusty, really appreciate you being on with us today. A lot of great information, a lot of great guidance, and you want to, if someone would like to contact you directly, you want to.
Oh, let me, I'll just put in my, can I open the chat yet? Let's see. Yeah, here's my, in the chat, I put my email address, and I can probably just type it here in one of the answers to David's comments here.
Yeah, and if you guys, would like to contact Rusty directly, that's great. He and I work together on a lot of stuff. So he'll probably give me a shout anyway. But he's always happy to help, always happy to educate and to really provide information, when he can. So but we really appreciate everyone being on today.
Yes.
Hopefully you got some great information. Again, reach out if there's any other questions that you might think of later, and we're always happy to answer them. So with that, we're at about 10:57, it looks like. So we'll got about 3 minutes. We can get back to you anyway. So thanks again, Rusty, and you and I'll
Hey,
talk
thank you,
again
guys.
soon. And thanks to everyone for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
So much better without a PowerPoint. Thanks, John.
Good deal.
Bye, guys.